As part of the third generation of football's most famous family, Arch Manning became the most sought-after recruit in college football history. One school wanted him so badly that they spent over $250,000 on a 2-day recruiting visit. But is all the hype surrounding Arch warranted, or nothing more than the product of his last name? While everybody associates the Mannings with football, their family actually has a strict ban on playing the sport. The steward of the family, Arch's grandfather and former NFL quarterback Archie, decided that none of his sons would be allowed to play tackle football until it was offered in school.
I wouldn't let them play tackle football, so they had to wait till junior high to play football.
And even with all the advancements in player safety over the years, Arch's dad, Cooper, refused to make an exception for him. So, up until middle school, Arch was only allowed to play flag football. It's fair to question whether this decision would stunt his development as a player, but football's in Arch's blood. He attended the same school both of his uncles did, Isidore Newman, a prep school in New Orleans, and by the spring of his 8th grade year, Arch was already practicing with the varsity team. Him being out there at such a young age was not just a move designed to generate publicity or show respect to the Mannings. Newman's head coach Nelson Stewart even said, "As Arch started here in middle school, I think everybody's goal has been to just give him as normal a life as we can, but it was immediately clear that he belonged on the field, regardless of his age or last name." In fact, Stewart still remembers the first time Arch took a snap with the first-team offense. On that play, Arch noticed that the defense was shifting from a cover 3 scheme, with corners and safeties protecting the deep thirds of the field, to cover 1, with all but a safety playing man-to-man. Arch checked at the line of scrimmage and fired a 50-yard touchdown pass. This level of poise and presence from such a young player was so uncommon that it blew away anyone watching. It was also the main reason why Stewart felt comfortable enough doing something with Arch that neither Eli nor Peyton had done back in their day. Arch became the first freshman quarterback to start Newman's season opener in over 40 years. Up until that point, his family had tried their best to keep him out of the spotlight and let him have a normal childhood. But once he was named QB1, everything changed. That year, Manning exploded onto the scene, throwing for nearly 2,500 yards and 34 touchdowns on his way to being named Max Prep's National Freshman of the Year. There was no hiding from the media anymore, as everyone wanted to hear what he had to say. After that season, Sports Illustrated even featured him in an article, an honor reserved for only the brightest and hottest prospects. And the media were not the only ones who desperately wanted a piece of the young prodigy. College coaches began to fantasize about Manning one day being the face of their program. Every school in the nation was suddenly interested in him. Stewart, who was Newman's coach when Odell Beckham Jr. was there, said this about Arch's recruitment: "I was so blessed to coach Odell Beckham, and I thought that was crazy. I had no idea." At the time, Manning was 6'2", 180 pounds, and still growing. The sky was the limit in terms of what he could eventually become. With the high school football world now revolving around this rising sophomore, some of Newman's games started to be nationally televised. Their games became an absolute circus, with Manning, of course, serving as the main attraction. Before and after them, random people of all ages would approach and ask him for pictures. They had no shame, as one time, 2 grown men posed as working photographers just to share a sideline with Manning before being escorted off the field. For almost any high school sophomore, these events would have been too much of a distraction to succeed. But Manning wasn't like most kids his age. He didn't spend time on social media, playing video games, or watching TV. All Manning really cared about was playing football and spending quality time with his friends or family. In regard to how he was handling the fame, Stewart said, "The biggest thing is Arch is such a good kid. He's really handled it with a great deal of maturity." Staying humble and not letting it go to his head helped Manning put together a special sophomore season. He threw for just under 2,000 passing yards and 21 touchdowns, while adding in 8 more scores on the ground. Despite being named to the Max Prep's sophomore All-American team, he still wasn't satisfied and wanted more. Stewart talked about how hard Manning can be on himself and that he's his own biggest critic. But these are some of the things that make him special. Another trait that makes Manning unique is that he's a total film junkie. It's rare for a player that young to watch a ton of film. Usually kids at that age care more about creating or watching highlight tapes than truly breaking it all down. But Manning couldn't get enough of the process and fell in love with it, so much so that it managed to shape the University of Texas coaching staff's perception of him on an unofficial visit. While in Austin during the summer before his junior year, Manning spent time with Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian and other coaches in front of a whiteboard. After Manning accidentally left his notes behind, someone found them and gave them to Sarkisian. Sarkisian then called Stewart, saying it took their breath away and that it was staggering how much information Manning was writing down. Sarkisian also told Stewart, "I just want you to know that I've been doing this for a long time and I've worked with a lot of quarterbacks. Even if I never get to coach this kid, the fact that I got to work with him today was phenomenal." makes it all worth it. That's the kind of impression he had on us. Manning was well on his way to earning a reputation for himself on and off the field with the overall way he carried himself. He had every right to be full of himself, but instead continued to surprise and win people over with his down-to-earth demeanor. On top of that, he never stopped grinding to get better. As Manning's coach said, he enjoys the training, the extra work, and going in early. Sometimes I gotta remind him that it's a day off for a reason. He doesn't take it. He's expanded and got better probably than I ever could have imagined. As a junior, Manning passed for over 1,800 yards with 26 touchdowns and just 4 interceptions, while rushing for over 350 yards and 7 touchdowns. In addition to being named first-team All-State by the Louisiana Football Coaches Association, he had established himself as the consensus #1 overall recruit in the class of 2023. But the way the season ended had people wondering whether or not this was actually deserved. As a 2A school, Newman's regular season slate would be considered a cupcake schedule. The schools they faced stood no chance against a future Division I quarterback. The real competition didn't arrive until the postseason, and in the state semis, Newman was handed an absolute beatdown as Manning completely disappeared in a 49-7 loss. He completed just 6 of his 17 passes for 49 yards, while rushing for only 15 more. The performance raised concerns about whether Manning had simply been taking advantage of lesser competition while playing in one of the lowest divisions and relying on his last name. As Mike Farrell, the former national director of recruiting for Rivals, put it, if his name was Arch Smith, I think he'd probably be a high 3-star quarterback.
He plays a very low level of competition. He hasn't progressed.
And when he has had to step up against other competition, especially in the playoff game where he looked awful, just hasn't translated. But people like Farrell voicing negative opinions about Manning didn't stop basically every program in the nation from trying to get him. And after a few years of this chase, with the clock winding down, some schools put on a full-court press. Places like Texas were so desperate that they spent unfathomable amounts of money to try and seal the deal. For Manning's official recruiting visit the summer before his senior season, Texas rolled out the red carpet for him and 8 other recruits that included airfare, 5-star hotels, food, desserts, entertainment, and an open bar for parents. All in all, the Longhorns spent nearly $280,000 on the 2-day visit. As crazy as that number may sound, it was totally worth it. 4 days after the visit, Manning tweeted out that he committed to Texas. It took just 6 words, a hashtag, and a simple picture. There was no edited graphic, extended highlight tape, long message, or over-the-top ceremony. But none of those things are Arch Manning. As Stewart put it, he has such a good level of humility. He doesn't like attention, and he doesn't draw attention to himself. For Manning, the focus has always been on tuning out all the noise and just becoming a better football player. He could have rested on his laurels and been happy with being a great passer, but instead, he continued to put in the work. And by his senior season, Manning had the fastest straight-line speed of the entire Newman team. An anonymous major college football coach who watched Manning's film extensively said, "He looks a lot like his 2 uncles, at least when they were coming out of high school, and probably has even better arm strength. He's definitely more mobile and always knows where he's going with the ball." The comparisons aren't fair to Peyton and Eli, but I also don't think that any of that phases him. As much as anything, his presence and composure are what stand out. Sound familiar? But after years of being compared to Eli and Peyton, Arch, as a senior, finally left his own legacy. In a single game that season, Arch broke Newman's records for career passing yards and touchdowns, marks previously held by his 2 uncles. It was a special moment from a senior year that cemented Arch as being way more than just their nephew. He threw for almost 2,300 yards with 34 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions, while rushing for 6 touchdowns. Arch finished his high school career with 8,599 passing yards, over 1,000 more than Eli, and 115 touchdowns, 22 more than Peyton. He also added in 1,155 rushing yards and 25 touchdowns on the ground. Having risen to the occasion every step of the way so far, Manning will have to once again prove himself at Texas. He comes in with arguably the highest expectations in college football history, but not everybody is sold on him just yet.
How good is this kid? I mean, I know he's high school. I mean, you're going to college. We're going to see what you got. He's a Manning. That comes with huge, huge expectations.
Some people need to actually see him succeed against elite competition, not just tiny Louisiana high schools, before buying into the hype. But none of this uncertainty has stopped Manning from having the highest name, image, and likeness valuation of any high school or college football player. In fact, all the talk only contributes to his NIL valuation being a whopping $3.5 million before even playing a down of college ball. What's even crazier is is that this number could be higher if Manning actually committed to building out his social media presence. But that number, just like his name, will be meaningless when Manning finally takes the field for the Longhorns. He'll have to prove with his play that he's worth every penny and bit of hype. His college coach believes that he's fully capable of doing just that. Ahead of Manning's arrival in Austin, Sarkisian said, "He's extremely gifted. He's got all the attributes needed to be a good quarterback. He's 6'4", 225. He's got a great arm. He's a good athlete. He's got really good fundamentals. There's not a throw he can't make. He's got the desire, the competitiveness, the work ethic needed to be great at the position." Sarkisian also said that Manning will get the chance to compete for the starting job as a freshman. He will have stiff competition with Quinn Ewers, who knows a thing or two about high expectations himself as a former #1 overall recruit in the country. With a perfect rating from some recruiting services, only time will tell whether Arch just took advantage of a weak high school competition or if he'll live up to the name on the back of his jersey.